On this channel, I specialise in making really complex looking images easy to create. So just follow along with my step-by-step tutorial of this painting and you will amaze yourself. Okay, first of all, please excuse the various different scratches and marks that happen to have appeared on the screen protector that I'm using. I did a Apple Pencil alternative test and review, and it does seem like some of the Apple Pencil alternatives have actually scratched the screen protector. If you want to check out that video, there is a link for it, and I will follow this up with a video where I do a comparison between a Paperlike screen protector and another leading brand. But in terms of this video, I've pre-selected some colours here. There's not many, and you can look again down in the video description. Each one of these colours has what we call a hexadecimal code linked to it. Take a note of the ones in the description, type them in this space one at a time and press enter. The colour appears up here and then you can just tap it together yourself. Or also next to that is a link that takes you to my Patreon page where you can download this colour file for free. And obviously that is where you can go and support this video and future videos too. In terms of the brushes, I'm only going to use the brushes that come with Procreate. So I'm going to use the airbrushing soft brush, also the medium brush, the one below it. And within the luminance brushes, I'm going to be using the light pen. And before I get started, if you like this kind of tutorial, please give this video a thumbs up, hit the subscribe, and don't forget the bell notification to make sure you are notified of my future videos as well. So the first thing I'm going to do on layer 1 is go to my colours, and I'm going to get this first colour, the very dark blue, and the only thing I'm going to do with it really is just drag to flood fill the entire canvas. I'm going to create a new layer, layer 2, go to my second colour, go to my brushes, back to the airbrushing, soft brush. I'm going to put it up to maybe just shy of the top, so about 90% and 100% opacity, and straight up the middle I'm just going to do this. And I'm going to do that twice, and you can see it's preserved some of that dark colour at the very edges, really not much at all. I'm going to create a new layer, and on this layer I'm still going to use the soft brush within airbrushing with the third colour. This time I'm going to put the size not at the 100%, so less than that, somewhere about the 40% and about the 20% opacity, and just in the center initially at the top. I'm just going to create like a curved shape and then do the same at the bottom too. Then I'm going to go to the adjustments, Gaussian blur, and blur that in to about the 50%. Okay, we're going to create a new layer, layer 4, and we're going to switch to the luminance brushes and the light pen. I'm going to go on the fourth colour along. I'm going to have the brush size at about 50% and not too high on the strength, only about 20% opacity. And this brush is pressure sensitive, so I'm going to press hard and then light and create something of a kind of ripple and wave that cuts across. Now, I don't want this extending too much up here, so I'm going to concentrate somewhat in the lower regions. So I can press hard, have it overlapping and doubling up, maybe do some more here, and just really keep it quite loose, have them crossing over each other like I say, pressing hard, letting go a bit, pressing on a bit more, letting that shape overlap, create cross points, have a big wide gap and then they close in together, maybe have another one where it just cuts across, just really creating the sense, because the top of the water is rippling and light's coming through it, and it just creates these light ripples on the seabed, on the sand. And we're just creating a series of ripples that cut across. Maybe have a slight straightening up as we approach that kind of horizon line, which is underwater. It's not really on the horizon but it's underwater, a straight line nevertheless, as we near the center area. Now we're going to have this very subtle. We might even use the eraser, but there's nothing wrong with adding some of these lines initially in anyway. Just gives you a sense of that perspective. Then I'm going to change direction, so maybe come at it from this angle or diagonally cut across this way anyway. So again, just keep with the curves. You can have another line that's just right next to it. Vary up the sensitivity, the pressure sensitive. Press, don't press, press, don't press. Now when I say don't press, I don't mean don't touch the screen, I just mean don't press hard with the Apple Pencil. So we're cutting across from the different direction. Allow it to have a bit of a wobble to it. It's almost like you're creating kind of like a grid mesh, like a net of these shapes. So diagonals that cut across that way, and then diagonals that kind of cut across the other way. And they overlap and really creates quite a messy area really. And on that front, I'm going to go to the adjustments, Gaussian blur, and just soften it in somewhat to about the 5% will do. I'm going to stay on the same layer, but I'm going to turn the brush size down to about 30% now. And the intensity, the opacity of the brush up to about 30%. And any point now where you're getting a cluster of crossing lines, there's going to be an intensity of the amount of light in that area. So all I need to do now, for example here, it's got a big juncture point where all those lines cross over each other, and I'm just going to create a real spike of light in that area. Now I can see another one here, and I can just imagine that they all cross over and doubling, tripling, quadrupling the strength of the light that hits in that point. If you find anywhere, like I say, that has a lot of that, you can just go over. It doesn't matter whether it's slightly towards the edge, but we are going to concentrate a little bit more towards this center foreground area. Let's turn the size of that brush up actually, back up to about 40. And you can also just follow the odd random line a little bit. So maybe there's a line here I just want to strengthen up. Then it hits a real light point there. And maybe it can trail off up here. So we're not particularly adding anything new. We're just using what's already there and just going over it, letting go, pressing on a bit more as it joins back up again. You can add slight ghosting. So you've got a line there and maybe just a line that's very close to it and hugs it. So a doubling up of lines perhaps. We'll zoom in there. You can see there was the original line and I just added like a trail that goes with it. Maybe a line here. And this isn't particularly deliberated over. It's, you know, quite easy. And again, just follow some of those lines lightly to begin with. And only when you get to like junction points do you want to press on a bit more. So again, follow these lines loosely, perhaps just weaving in and around some of the lines that you've already created. Use them as your guide points. You're not, like I say, creating new lines as such, but you are kind of just slightly missing them in places, and it just doubles up that effect. You could even just find shapes and kind of outline them a little bit. So I'm going to create an outline around this shape here, or juncture points where we can just add a touch more light, and just keep working the image in that way. So any of these little junctions, we can really ramp up the light. And even double up the strength of some of these lines as well, and create kind of ghost lines that follow along but not exactly. We are going to soften this in again with the Gaussian blur, so although it might appear quite sharp initially, it won't be by the time we've blurred it in again. So there's a little bit of a contrast currently between the first lines we added and these new lines, but yeah, we can soften that in. Now the effect of this, after you've been looking at it for quite a while, it does deceive the eye and you stop seeing it as looking particularly like the water ripples that you first perhaps would see it as. Sometimes you need to step away from this after you've done it and come back to it, and you'll find that, oh yeah, it is working, but it's a little bit deceptive. The more you look at it, it's like sometimes you look at a word and it just doesn't seem to make sense. You can overlook at something sometimes. Once you've analysed it and broken it down, it just kind of loses the effect. So what I'm doing here is nothing majorly controlled. I'm just pressing on at kind of junction points and allowing it to flow and move across. I'm avoiding the outer edges a little bit more. Like I say, I just want to focus the eye a little bit more in the center. I'm just weaving lines lightly across. When I think I get to a major junction point rather, I'm just doubling up the effect, going over it a bit and really creating a spike in that light. But again, I can perhaps go back to this image or this section and just create another ghosting line, and then you've created almost like a new shape there. It's still following the guidelines that we put in there initially, but you find that the water ripples create an absolute ton of varying subtle lines that all intersect, cross over each other, and something like this. I would use those initial guidelines as your main point where you're going to get the real concentration of light. But like I say, we are kind of adding kind of ghost lines that cut in and around those initial ones. Then we're going to go back to the adjustments, Gaussian blur, and we are going to blur it in a bit, not as much this time, perhaps to about the 3%. I'm going to switch to the airbrushing, soft brush again, put that down to something that's a bit more controllable, so about 2% size, about 20% opacity, and we can just go into some of these shapes and just kind of blot in some sections here where you've got like a contained area, and you can just go in with this now. You've got a group of shapes that all kind of gather, and then you can just sort of kind of colour in really. You don't want to do this too much all over, but yeah, just in some sections it seems to just really add something. So keep it a little bit random, again avoiding the outer edges a little bit. So let's find another section where we can colour in a shape. So here's a section, colour in that shape here. And we've still got a little bit too much of the dark colour showing through that we initially put down. So what I'm going to do is create a new layer, put it underneath layer 4, and now with the 5th colour along, still using the soft brush with an airbrushing, put up to about 10% size and about, well, 10% opacity as well. And I'm just going to start underneath everything we've just done, bringing in a bit more light into this section generally. So again, avoid the outer edges and don't bring it too far up, but we're just bringing that effect in a little bit. Not too far up, I think I've encroached too much. Easy to encroach too far up, so just be mindful of that. Try not to do that. Go back onto layer 4. I think I'm going to switch back to the Luminance light pen. With this even lighter colour now, I'm going to put the strength of this light pen at around 40% and about 40% size as well. And I'm just going to add, now we can see exactly what we've got, just a few points of light I think will work for us. Now I do feel like it's encroaching a little bit too far up. Before I remove any of it, I'm going to go to a slightly lighter, or maybe the 3rd colour along, because with the light pen that's still going to be very light. I'm going to put the light pen low down at around 15%, keep it at the 40% size, and I'm just lightly going to start adding in some of these shapes for like the distance. In fact, no, that still isn't strong enough. Let's put it up to about 25%. And we can just add a few points off there in the distance. We don't want it to be too strong, but we are going to go in with an eraser in a moment anyway, just to subdue and soften. But just, we need a sense that it's going off in the distance here too. Okay, something like that. I think that helps. But we're going to go in with the eraser on the soft brush, put it up quite big, so about, well, 15% should do, size. Not too strong, so about 10% opacity or so, and just soften this back area in just a little bit. You don't want to remove it completely, but just soften it a bit, and then it really makes this light area that bit more light by contrast. Then we're going to create a new layer on top. I'm going to go back to my airbrushing soft brush, but I'm going to slightly amend the soft brush. So click on it. I'm going to go to the Apple Pencil section, and I want the pressure to affect the size. So I'm going to put that up to about, well, we'll try about 30%. And now I'm going to show you the impact of this. Choose an appropriate colour where you're going to see it. And if I press lightly, in fact I'll need to turn it down so you can really see the contrast. So about 3% size, press lightly or press harder, you can see it creates a variety of different sizes. And just to remind you, I'm on the 5th colour along now, and I'm going to put the brush size, well, we'll try about the 4% actually, and the strength at about 20%, the opacity at 20. And I'm going to start by pressing on lightly, press on a bit more, and then release again. And we've created this kind of lozenge shape, or a taper at either end. And then I'm going to do another one next to it, press on more, and then you can see how it works. Maybe another one over here, press a bit more, like so. Again, another one here that just sort of nestles in that space. Maybe leave a bit of a gap, but a really nice big one at the top, and then it tapers off. Maybe one here that's just a bit more stretched out, doesn't all have to be the same size. Another really big one that cuts in here and then decreases and sort of sandwiches and rests in that place. maybe a bit of a gap, press on, and then light, again finds its place. Maybe a bit of a wave this time. Another bit of a wave there, and another one. I feel like that's quite strong, or rather quite strong, so I'm going to go to the layer and turn that down. I want it to be a bit more subtle, so I'm going to put it to about 50%. And I'm going to create a layer on top of that, so layer 7. And we can do the same thing again with layer 7, but we kind of use that as the starting point, and we can play and interact around that as well. So same settings, but we can go inside of that shape and create more, and it can be inside that. You can double up what you've already done, but you don't have to stick to it. So you can have other ones that interplay around it. I'm pressing lightly and then press a bit more, press lightly again. And then what I'll probably need to do is turn it down to the lowest part of 3%, just before it becomes 2. And just a bit more precise then when I need to be. And we could even turn it down to the 2 and do some really small ones. Same effect, but we want slightly more broken shapes, especially as we start coming down towards that center area, which is a bit like our horizon line. So it's the same as if you're painting clouds in the sky. They start off bigger because they represent the clouds that would be nearer to you. And the more you get towards the distance, in the middle usually, there's your horizon line, and everything starts to get further away, so it gets smaller versions. Now we're underwater, but it's, you know, it's the same kind of thing, even though it's in a different environment. You get the same rules of perspective, even underwater. So it's useful to think about your horizon line there too. Perhaps it's a little bit strong, so I'm going to turn that down to 10% strength. That allows me to be a bit more subtle and build up perhaps. We can go in with this and use the eraser again. And then maybe a series of shorter dashes where we're not, we're not overly controlled with them. They're just, more texture as it kind of disappears towards that horizon. And pressing lightly, it's a subtle impact this time at this point. And in that center area, they're just kind of disappearing off into less controlled, but more of these little dashes. You can't necessarily make them out. The more you do, the more they kind of join in just a general texture for that middle section. I'm going to create another layer on top, layer 8. Okay, so on layer 8, I'm going to go back to the Luminance light pen. I'm going to go back a few colors because the light pen really has a light quality of its own anyway. So I'm going to go back to the 3rd color. I'm going to put the size at 100% and the strength at about 30. And I'm just going to use it. So you have to press lightly if you want it to be thinner and lighter. And yeah, you have to be really a bit more deliberate with this pen. And I'm pressing on more and then less, depending on how I want to bring it out. We can have some thin streaks, extra kind of lines in here, and then sort of double it up in areas. Just bringing in a big shape here at the side, perhaps. Extending that line and then another big shape. It's a nice pen. You can go over a few times, and because you're on a lower opacity, you're just building up that effect. We're using the previous shapes as a guide, but you don't have to stick to them. You can add some extra little shapes here and there like this. Just multiplies the amount of texture, which is really good. Have a few more of these broken shapes in the center area. Press on a bit more in places, especially in the center region. Now, I would do a few breakaway ones. I think that is important to the effect. Again, join them up in places too. I can go to the adjustments, Gaussian blur, just soften it in a little bit if it's just not quite, the edges are not quite right. Not too much though, just a couple of percent, maybe 3%. Create a new layer. Change from the 3rd color to the 4th color, stay on the light pen, and again just continue to build up the impact of some of these shapes. Now I'm going to create some of them where the light really is breaking through. Again, I'm going to focus this more towards the center. I feel that's the most important. It's not to say you won't have touches of it a little off from the center as well, but we are definitely having more of it in this center region. Now if you need to go back a color, that's fine. You can just strip out some of the dark color where we have these strong lights, whatever works in your image. Now you don't need to copy this exactly. You know, I'm giving you a sense of what you need to do to build up this effect, but you can't copy the exact shapes. It's not possible really. Again, I'm going back to the fourth color. You can't copy the exact shapes. All you can do is try to replicate the kind of techniques, the overall sorts of shapes, but not the exact ones. Again, just add a couple, or intensify the light just as it goes off the top, maybe. Again, go back to the darker colour, merge them together where you feel it's necessary. If you want to just shut out some of the darker colours in certain areas, then that can work really effectively. I'm going to take these different layers, layers 9 to 6, and I'm just going to pinch them together onto one layer now, and you can see that. And I'm going to go back to the Gaussian blur and just blur it in a touch more, not too much, just a couple of percent, maybe 3%. I'm then going to create a layer on top. I'm going to go to my airbrushing soft brush. I'm going to use the white at the very end. In fact, no one. I'll use the one just before it first. I have the brush size at around 5%, and I put the opacity really low. Believe it or not, I'm going to put it down to the 1%, which you think wouldn't do very much, but at this type of subtlety is actually what we need. Now the sun is up here in the sky, presumably, and it's coming down here, so you have to imagine up here off the screen is your vanishing point. So you can do your lines accordingly. So they're not all joining to that point, they're joining at a point above that. So you can just kind of rotate your hand as you're adding these lines. Try to keep them quick. If you go too slowly, they kind of lose the straight lines. Now, obviously, with a program like this, you can press, hold, and then it should snap into a straight line. You can probably barely even see that. So you can do it that way. But the problem with that is that the beams of light expand as they get further away from their source. So I'm just going to generally create a block of light like so, and it gets slightly wider as it comes further in. And then another one for this, for example. They don't all have to be the same strength. Some of them can be more diffused, and that works absolutely fine. Another one over here, a bit more subtle. Perhaps I'll turn it down to the 2% size, and then I can get just a bit more specific now. Now I'm trying to generally think about the light coming through, obviously, from where we have the strongest light appearing at the top. Now we can take that layer, we can go to the adjustments, Gaussian blur is very much our friend. We can blur that in to about the 10%. Okay, I'm going to create a layer on top of that, layer 8. And on that layer, I'm going to change the blend mode by tapping on the N, do it again, and I can scroll down to the add. I'm going to use the 5th color along, 3% size and 1% opacity. And just starting where the light is coming from, I'm just going to really pronounce some of that. Now, even at 1%, which you think would do nothing, when it's on this particular blend mode, it's actually quite potent. So just go easy with it. Strengthen it up when you're at the source at the very top. Cuts on top of everything else, and just really, but you know, creating an extra couple of light things off to the side as well is worth doing. Fanning out as we get further off towards the edges. There's a danger with this is you just get too carried away. I'm just going to do a big size, 7%. There's a light source up here, so I'm just going to soften in, sense that there's light beams coming down there as well. Back down again, 3% size, just really solidify, shore up some of these real focal ones in the center there, maybe just a real nice strong one there. Again, bigger, 5%, soften that one in. I'm just going to go up to the top. In fact, I'm going to change color. I'm going to go to the white. Play around with these beams of light as much as you think is appropriate for your image. I'm just going to go back to layer 6 with the eraser set to the soft brush. I'm going to have it at a 20% size, low on the opacity, around 10%. And I can just take away a little bit of the intensity in that bottom area. Just so it really pushes your focal point up to that upper region. And again, I think I need to do a little bit more on that bottom section, do the same thing. And I think it just really puts your eye there and really puts your eye there. And I think I'm going to leave that particular image there at that point. I do push this image a little bit further and add more details with an extended video over at my Patreon page for those people that support me at the $10 and above level. Again, if you want to check out the link for my Patreon, that is down in the video description. I hope you've enjoyed following along with this tutorial. If you have, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, hit the subscribe, and don't forget that bell notification to make sure you are notified of my future videos. Thanks for watching. I shall catch you back here soon. Bye for now.